But the Jews had bought their way out for the incredibly small price of 30,000 gold ducats. Those who had not embraced Christianity, he thought, 170,000 now lost souls, were being set free upon the rest of the world to work their evil. Torquemada's old heart pounded, recalling the evening when he had confronted Ferdinand and Isabella, crying to them as he threw his crucifix on their dinner table, "Will you, my king and queen, do as Judas has done and betray your lord for money?" If they had not been the king and queen of Spain, he would have had them put to the question for their actions. The blue veins in his wrinkled hands nearly burst with tension as one hand attempted to strangle the other in his passion for justice. His meditations were interrupted by the entrance of Fray Francisco Morella, a good and valued servant of the Lord. The man was still in his 20s and destined for great things in the church, if his past history of service to the Inquisition was any indication. He entered the office on sandaled feet, his brown, homespun robe rustling softly as he approached the Inquisitor General. "Father, I am sorry to interrupt you at this hour, but we have found something which I think merits your personal attention." Torquemada leaned back, sucking in a deep breath and releasing it slowly. This helped him regain his composure. Weary as he was, he smiled at his faithful aide. "What is it, Brother Francisco, that keeps you awake this night?" Francisco wrung his hands in consternation. "Father, I believe we have found a sorcerer. In all our years, I have never seen one who more surely has the mark of the beast upon him." Torquemada sucked his lower lip. "Has he been put to the question?" Even in the pale light of the candle, he could see that Francisco's face was paler than normal, the lips almost white. The brother was deeply disturbed. "Yes, Father, both the boot and the screw. He admits nothing." Francisco almost broke into sobs, dropping to his knees to grasp the blue-veined hands of his superior. "Father, you must come and see this creature for yourself. He is beyond my experience, and I confess that I have a great dread whenever I am within the sight of his eyes." Gently, Torquemada removed his hands from the grasp of his younger servant. "Very well, then. I suppose that I must go and see this person you speak of. As we walk, tell me what you know of him." Guards posted at his door accompanied the good father as they did everywhere. There were heathens hidden even in the palaces who wished to stop his sacred work. In front and behind, the stern-faced soldiers of Catholic Castile escorted Torquemada and Francisco down the corridors leading to the dungeons. On the ground floors were fine offices, halls and galleries, with their walls covered with the work of Spain's finest artists and sculptors. Rare beauty marked every turning. But once the great oak door by which 2 guards stood closed behind them to let them into the inner regions below the fine rooms, they entered, if not hell, then at least purgatory. The smell of charcoal reached up the several tiers of stairs, lit by lamps in brackets bolted to the stone sides of the walls. Francisco lent his arm to the Inquisitor as they went down 2 levels. On the first level were the cells where lesser offenders were kept. Below them were the true dungeons and torture chambers, where the servants of God kept an endless vigil, performing their duties around the clock. From sun to sun they worked in relays, using the thumbscrew and rack, or straps and water. Only the use of iron was forbidden them in the treatment of heretics, but through long practice and study, the loss of iron was of small importance. They knew how to make up for its absence. The peasants swore that they could hear the sounds of screaming coming from the dungeons at all times of the day and night. But if it grew too loud, it was said that a block of wood was forced between the jaws, stopping most of the outcries. Those who were returned to their cells were usually too exhausted to do more than whimper in their sleep. The dungeon carried in its damp, smoke-streaked stones the aura of pain. One prisoner caught a quick glimpse of the sharp profile of Torquemada as he descended to the main chamber. That one look was enough to cause the man to loose his bladder upon himself, sending him back to the pile of filthy straw that served as his bed, to whimper and pray for mercy from someone, anyone. As they neared the bottom steps, Fray Francisco filled in the details which had brought this new prisoner to their attention. The man had been arrested by soldiers for riotous behavior in a tavern well known for its bad reputation, but it was tolerated on the waterfronts as a necessary evil, as long as the evil was kept within the tavern's own walls. This person had carried a fight into the streets, mauling several citizens and breaking the arm of one of the soldiers when he arrested him. During the confrontation, the man's tunic had been ripped from his body, exposing him to the eyes of the soldiers. They responded in the proper manner once they saw him and took him to the offices of the Inquisition, rather than to the jails which housed those with lesser offenses. "I must warn you, Father," Francisco said nervously to Torquemada. "This man has a most vile aspect in both body and speech. He blasphemes with every other word, and when I tried to offer him solace in the name of Jesus, he told me to take my crucifix and to perform the most abominable rites with it." At this hour, no one was being put to the question. Only 2 jailers and the night warden were to be seen, half dozing as they watched over their charges. When the footsteps of Torquemada and Francisco were heard, the warden came rapidly to his feet, rousing his dozing aides, bowing profusely, eager to serve his master.
"Where is the one who insulted Fray Francisco?"
inquired Torquemada gently. The warden in charge of this section of the dungeons bowed and scraped as he led the way to where the new man was being kept.
He is stoutly chained, Father. For certain he's a strong brute, such as I've seldom seen. If he hadn't been drunk, I don't think even my 3 good men could have gotten the shackles on him."
Torquemada's curiosity was definitely piqued. Carrying a torch before him, the warden led them to the cell nearest the rack, where the torturers did their best to straighten out the attitudes of the recalcitrant. Unbolting the door, he entered first, making room by standing against the side of the cell to allow his guests more room to view their prize. The flames of the torch gave the small cell a hellish aspect. Torquemada automatically made the sign of the cross when he saw what the flames of the jailer's torch exposed to his eyes. Motioning for the jailer to hold his torch over his charge, Torquemada moved a bit closer, covering his nose with a sleeve to keep out the worst of the odors caused by years of men defecating and urinating on the stone floors. The urine had dried and built up in the corners in yellow, weeping, crystalline piles. He inspected the unconscious figure whose chains had been drawn in, keeping him close to the walls. Torquemada was careful to keep out of range of the powerful arms and hands. In all his years, he had never seen a body such as the one before him. Never had he witnessed a figure so scarred and gouged that he yet had the force of life within its shell. The man had one long scar that ran from his right eye to the corner of his mouth and gave him, even while unconscious, a sinister aspect. To the mind of Torquemada, this man should have died a dozen times over. That much he knew from his long experience in the service of the Church as Grand Inquisitor. His duties required a fair knowledge of anatomy and what the human body could endure before the flesh gave up the spirit. This thing before him, huddled against the stones of the cell, should have been dead. A shiver ran